is well deserved. I've loved all of these stories of these players so far this year.
I'm trying to think if that was my list.
Wait a minute. Let me make sure I'm understanding Netflix correctly. Netflix wants to add sports to their platform. I get that part. Me personally, I think sports were better for the consumer when it was exclusive to cable and satellite. We already had the perfect setup. We already had all the games in one place. But from a business perspective, from a perspective of corporate greed, from a perspective of bleeding the bank accounts of sports fans across America, I understand why Netflix wants to broaden their sports coverage. I understand why Netflix wants to be viewed as a serious contender. What I don't understand is why Netflix would hire Elle Duncan as the face of their sports coverage. Elle Duncan. Elle Duncan. Was Bob Costas not available? What about Sam Ponder, Sage Steele, Rachel Nichols? Hell, you would be better off having an empty chair. I cannot stand AI, but you would be better off having an automated ass as the face of your sports coverage. Literally anyone would be better than Elle Duncan. This is the same Elle Duncan that was given a show by the worldwide leader in woke ESPN. Keyword, given. Elle Duncan doesn't generate interest. She doesn't draw ratings. Mina Kimes might pretend to analyze the NFL, but at least Mina Kimes contributes something. Believe it or not, there are lonely men who follow the betting advice of Mina Kimes. You know what the children of those lonely men are getting for Christmas? Jobs, because daddy lost all his money listening to Mina Kimes. But seriously though, after years of incessant complaining, after years of her talents being underutilized, ESPN finally decided to give Elle Duncan a show. Over the summer, Elle Duncan made her immaculate debut with a show called Vibe Check, checking vibes and hating guys. During the premiere episode, during the opening segment where you're making your first impression, where you're supposed to be giving people a reason to watch the show, the opening segment of the premiere episode, the talented Elle Duncan tried to entertain viewers by displaying some of the worst push-ups I have ever seen. The segment was so boring, producers moved the camera to her unknown co-host. They had to quickly go to commercial break because they were worried that the two anonymous women would fall off the couch in a boredom-induced sleep. To her credit, Elle Duncan is talented. That doesn't mean she's entertaining, but she is a talented host. But as is often the case with unentertaining talents, Elle Duncan generates more problems than she does viewers, both on and off screen. When the announcement was made last night that Elle Duncan would be the face of sports coverage at Netflix, it was obvious who the biggest loser was in this deal. They don't know it yet. I'm sure Netflix thinks we just signed a huge star. But Netflix is clearly the loser. Anytime you have a loser, gotta have a winner. And I think the biggest winner is the worldwide leader in woke, ESPN. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Link to the second channel in the description below. Today on the second channel, I will be unleashing another tirade aimed at the most incompetent organization in sports. Yesterday, the Saints held tryouts for a new kicker. They should have been trying out new kickers weeks ago. Hell, their current kicker, Blake Groupie, This kid couldn't hit Poopy with a magnetic ass. The Saints are looking for a new kicker. That is not the problem. Inviting Justin Tucker to tryouts is a problem, but it's not a problem for the reasons you may think. I explain why the Saints evaluating Justin Tucker is another warning sign of the unbelievable incompetence of this organization. So if you haven't already, click the link in the description below, subscribe to the second channel. Also, send in your nominations for the upcoming 3rd annual Huge Embarrassing Failure Awards. If you have someone you want to nominate, shoot me an email, btlkc84@gmail.com. I don't know the details of Elle Duncan's imminent departure from ESPN, so I am speculating here. But if ESPN really wanted to keep Elle Duncan, if ESPN viewed Elle Duncan as a valuable asset, I cannot imagine they would be letting her go. And I also can't imagine that Elle Duncan would leave. If I had to guess, this was a financial decision for Elle Duncan. I'm assuming Netflix offered her more money and ESPN refused to match the offer. The decision couldn't have been based on reach or mainstream exposure. In terms of sports coverage, ESPN is the top of the mountain. Netflix isn't known as a sports brand. Netflix is more known for doofus reality shows like Blind Love or Circle of Wankers. This situation between Elle Duncan and ESPN kind of reminds me of the situation with ESPN and Molly Qerim from a couple of months ago. Remember when Molly Qerim abruptly quit First Take? One day she's hosting the show, doing what she does best, which is interrupting the real stars to inject her unwanted opinion. Next day, Molly Qerim disappeared back to the world of anonymity. According to reports, one of the reasons that Molly Qerim left or was fired by ESPN, she wanted her own show. Like I've been telling you guys for years, Molly Qerim thinks she's a star. Of course, she was the only one who thought that. Everyone else, ESPN included, thought Molly Qerim was a host. ESPN refused to give Molly Qerim her own show, but they did overlook their better judgment and gave Elle Duncan her own show. Obviously, no one was watching that garbage. Vibe Check fulfilled expectations of being a huge embarrassing failure. But with ESPN giving Elle Duncan her own platform, it makes me think her decision to leave for Netflix is motivated by money. It makes me think ESPN didn't see the value that Elle Duncan clearly sees in herself. If that's the case, it's not hard to understand why ESPN refused to overpay Elle Duncan. Like I said, ESPN is the clear winner. They got rid of Elle Duncan and they didn't have to deal with the negative publicity of firing her. Let's review some of Elle Duncan's accomplishments at ESPN. If you were making the decisions at Netflix, you tell me if this is who you would hire as the face of your sports coverage. Elle Duncan interrupted live coverage of the women's tournament, which ESPN was falsely marketing as March Madness. Elle Duncan interrupted live coverage of the women's tournament to protest the mythical Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. She interrupted live coverage of sports on a sports network to express her grievances against a myth. During a live edition of SportsCenter, she hijacked the broadcast to pressure fathers across America to support on-demand abortions. How many of those fathers are eligible for abortions? I'm assuming Elle Duncan believes that men can get pregnant, but for the rest of us, we have never saw a pregnant dude walk into an abortion clinic and walk out with a miraculous weight loss. Supposedly, Elle Duncan has a reputation of being toxic or problematic behind the scenes. She is alleged to have questioned the blackness of Sage Steele. She praised Jamel Hill after Smelly Jameli accused ESPN of mythical racism. She publicly criticized Kirk Herbstreit. She's had on-air arguments with Stephen A. Smith. Elle Duncan is literally the face of privilege at ESPN, yet she is constantly complaining about the privilege of others. Is this who you want as the face of your sports coverage? To me, at least in terms of reach, in terms of potential mainstream exposure, moving to Netflix is a step down for Elle Duncan. I'm sure they made it worth it to her financially, but at Netflix, Elle Duncan could literally disappear. Maybe Netflix is dedicated to sports. Maybe they are looking to take sports seriously long term. But what are they going to cover? NBA's locked in with ESPN, NBC, Amazon. NFL's not leaving the broadcast networks anytime soon. I think Major League Baseball just signed a new deal with ESPN. The NHL is somewhere. They're damn sure not on Netflix. So, as the face of sports coverage at Netflix, what is Elle Duncan going to cover? Is she going to cover Jake Paul fights that are generating less and less interest? Even if they were generating interest, Jake Paul only fights 2-3 times a year. Netflix has the season opener for Major League Baseball. They got the Home Run Derby. They have the NFL on Christmas Day. They have the Women's World Cup in 2027. That's about it. So what is Elle Duncan going to be covering besides dead air? Hell, maybe this was a smart move by Netflix, because Elle Duncan is one of the best in the business at converting oxygen to carbon dioxide. This is why I believe this was purely a financial decision by Elle Duncan. She was heavily featured at ESPN, hosted SportsCenter, she was given her own show. ESPN went out of their way to make Elle Duncan a diversity superstar. And I'm sure Elle Duncan believes she is a star. Hell, Netflix clearly thinks so. But just like with Molly Karam, just like with Max Kellerman, you remove the ESPN platform, you remove their reach, and Elle Duncan will soon share a characteristic with the WNBA players that she adores: anonymity. Sound off in the comments below. I'll see you guys later.